And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Business Focus Live with me, John, where we talk about business related topics as well as news from here and around the world. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and let's get started. And we're back. Thank you again for joining me. Today is December 17th. So Christmas is around the corner and the new year is a few weeks away. So in this week's episode, we'll be talking about some interesting stories that has happened in the past week or so. So we'll start first with Amazon. It's always about Amazon. They're always in the news, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we'll talk about how Amazon has progress in the past year or so. Obviously, they've made tremendous strides in terms of taking advantage of the demand for their products online. But with everything else, well, it's kind of up in the air in a sense. Next, we'll be talking about how one of the big tech companies in the world, Microsoft, is trying to acquire another company to leverage its position. Now, the question is, would it be considered antitrust or unfair competitive advantage? We'll talk about that. Next is for you Apple Watch lovers out there. You wanna stay tuned later on as we discuss the pitfalls of owning a Apple smartwatch. Should you be concerned or is it just an aberration here? Next, we'll be talking about in terms of the airline industry, which was hammered, when they had to stop operations literally from last year. But the government has stepped in by bailing them out. But the problem now is, despite the bailout, there's a shortage of airline staff because they had to let them go, whether voluntarily or not voluntary in that sense. So we'll talk about that. And lastly, some I don't know if it's great news or bad news, so I let you decide. In terms of universities in the Philippines, particular Ateneo, the university is planning to resume face-to-face classes by next year. Now, is that a good strategy, decision? What are the considerations here? What are the repercussions? We'll talk about that in a bit as well. So to start off, as mentioned, so when we're talking of Amazon here, now obviously they've been doing well in terms of making profit revenues at an all-time high, but with the advantage of being the dominant in terms of preferred e-commerce platform, there's always issues with how they treat their customers, how they treat their business partners, the resellers, and as well as even what do you call this, as an industry in a sense that they earn that monopolistic practice to benefit the consumers, or does it just benefit the company itself? Anyway, let's take a closer look. So according to cnet.com, Amazon has fought unions, regulations, and rising costs in 2021. Now, obviously, despite the resurgence of Amazon in terms of being the dominant force over of its demand for online products when people were stuck at home. Now, obviously, the increased surge of demand necessitates an increased surge also of employees. But as everyone knows, when last year, when we were in the state last year, it's difficult to get people to go to work in a safe environment to help them be protected and be able to do their jobs, whether in the warehouse as well as the delivery services here. And yet, Amazon is paying minimally in terms of just actually. I found it funny that I saw one of the videos that they advertise in YouTube that they're making an advertisement on propping up in terms of how exciting it is to work in their company by paying the minimum wage, which is another issue altogether, because if you did the math, $15 is not enough. If you did the math, if you work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, or even 6 days a week for a month, if you do the math, it generates you less than $30,000 a year, would you consider that a sustainable living? That's why there's a difference between minimum wage versus living wage here, and but that's another discussion here. When Amazon is trying to prop that their pro employees is somewhat suspect because of we've discussed this in I think early this year or late last year, wherein they fired an employee where they were vocal in terms of the status of not protecting, not enough safety protocols, or uh, I won't say inviting, but in terms of the situation in their facility, how vulnerable people are. Obviously, at the end of the day, you have people in the warehouses sorting different packages to deliver to the different customers here. Anyway, let's see here. Or was it? So, but according to Amazon, they want to change that narrative in terms of how they're being portrayed. Obviously, they've been in hot waters. It's not just how they treat their employees, but as well as the consumers, right? You have the ongoing issue with fake reviews. Companies are paying reviewers to give a favorable review so that you can coerce or fool customers when they see there's a 4 or 5 star rating. This is a reliable information that people would buy your product. And how come the company which handles the platform, Amazon, can't even distinguish that or stop them dead on their tracks? Another issue is you have sellers who are selling counterfeit products, which is why in our previous discussion as well, companies like Nike, who used to sell their products on their platform, has already stopped doing that because it emboldens those other companies to take advantage of the popularity of the brand. So if you know that the legit company, or in this case Nike, is selling their products online, counterfeit companies could also sell in their products, and people can get easily confused as to if they're selling authentic or fake products here. And again, it always goes back to Amazon. Since companies are paying a fee for using their platform, how come the company themselves, Amazon, with the billion-dollar resources, with technologies, AI, and so forth, are not able to stop those, nefarious parties, so to speak? And obviously, it goes beyond there as well. So let's see here. So Amazon being a great place to work and a business that guarantees low prices for customers and delivers lightning speed. And obviously, at the end of the day, they wanted to cater to their number one customer, which is the buyers who buys in their products. So they want to maintain the low cost of products, which entices people to buy on their platform. Otherwise, no one would buy in their platform if it's an expensive endeavor. They're willing to take even a loss so that they can compete with other sellers as well, which is another issue that I have with Amazon here. And obviously, a lot of reports have surfaced when Amazon began and ended the year fighting a unionization movement at its Bessemer, Alabama warehouse, which is obviously there are some employees that are not happy on how they're being treated. They wanted to unionize to protect the interests of the workers, but obviously Amazon wants to stop that so that they will not be able to bring up a significant hindrance to the company here. So the workers rejected unionizing. Sorry. So the workers rejected unionizing with the rationale because they were persuaded by management to stop doing that. That would halt any progress that any workers has any issues with the company here. Now, whether that's fair or not is a separate issue here altogether. But the question here is, what does Amazon do here? Now, obviously, you're allowed to make profit significant profit, but not at the expense of your employees, customers, resellers as well, which are your major stakeholders here, not just the shareholders who who has invested in the company. Because if people wise up, which is the another issue here, if people let companies like Amazon, you still support buying their products online despite knowing that how they treat their employees, especially the delivery people who are given a quota in terms of how many delivers are they required to deliver in a day, and they're not allowed to take breaks. That's why there were reports that even delivery workers had to pee in a bottle, which is kind of a sad joke. If it's true, then it's kind of concerning. And even incorporating technology within the, what do you call this, in their delivery services by monitoring how their drivers are performing in terms of if they're concentrating on the delivery or on the driving itself or not, and then they will be penalized. It's not as if their software is foolproof, which is another issue altogether here. So Amazon is leveraging technology here to improve operations, optimize their, reduce their costs by investing on not just technology but in robotics. So trying to replace human intervention in the long run, which is still a long ways to go. Now in terms of the warehouse, I think they're doing a lot of headway in terms of investing on optimization of moving of packages from the warehouse to the delivery trucks all the way to the consumers. But in terms of delivery, I think it takes some time because AI hasn't reached that point that a vehicle can drive itself safely, and people would accept that in the real world. So we still have to wait and see. But I'm very vocal or against as to how Amazon deals with its consumers and its other partners as well. The fact that Mr. Jeff Bezos, the former CEO, has stepped down and let someone else handle the day-to-day operations of the company is very telling that being the CEO of a billion-dollar company can be stressful, and obviously the top management are benefiting while the rest, the rank and file employees, are the one who's suffering. And yet those are the people that are your frontliners, so to speak. That is the key drivers for your main business here. Anyway, next we'll be talking another tech company here. We have Microsoft, according to Reuters.com, is set to win an EU antitrust nod for acquiring the $16 billion Nuance deal. So obviously another company that is under the microscope for antitrust, being monopolistic in their industry. Obviously, companies should be allowed to grow as a company and acquire other companies. But the question here is, does it benefit companies, or does it breed competition, or does it limit the options of the end users here, or the customers who going to be affected here? Let's see here. Now, obviously, when Microsoft was announced that the deal of acquiring Nuance, which is a big boost for their cloud services, in particular in the healthcare industry, the key difference for Nuance is they offer speech technology. They actually help launch Apple's Siri virtual assistant. So that's first time I'm hearing it. So it's pretty remarkable that they're able to acquire that company. But what's interesting here is that Nuance, the company mentioned, has a big market share in the healthcare industry, as much as owning 77% of the U.S. hospitals. So you can just imagine the excitement for Microsoft being able to delve into the healthcare industry in one fell swoop, and being the dominant market in the company. The fact that they're willing to pay billions of dollars for a company here, whether it's worth it or not. Now they've also acquired other companies along the way. You also have LinkedIn, which I think, how much they acquired for that company? Let me see here. I forgot how much they acquired for that one, which is another issue altogether. And then in their other aspects in Microsoft, they also acquired a gaming publisher of Bethesda, ZeniMax. Is it ZeniMax? Yeah, which owns Bethesda for their gaming division for Xbox here, right? So they have a lot of resources at their disposal. So they're selective in terms of how they choose which companies to acquire, and obviously Nuance here is a big help for their positioning here. Now, question here is it advantageous for consumers or for other companies? Seeing that big companies are getting bigger and bigger, you also have Facebook, which obviously acquired or bought Instagram. Then you also have Amazon, which we talked about earlier, which bought the film studio MGM. Then they also have they bought Twitch. So you see different companies acquiring big companies as well, so that it strengthens their position. Now that's good on their side, but for the consumer side, for competition side, does it benefit us in the long run here? And obviously, the antitrust issue is not just predominant in the United States, but also in other parts of the world. So Microsoft has been in preliminary discussion with Britain's antitrust agency with regards to the approval of the Nuance deal. So it has global repercussions here with regards to how deals like this can have an impact here. Actually, the European Commission asked the customers and competitors to list concerns about the deal. Well, obviously, you don't have to ask people to see, if big multinational companies acquire other big companies to prop up their position. It lessens the position of other market. Just think of how Apple and Google positions their platforms, right? Especially for the Google Play Store and for the App Store, Apple App Store there. If other companies try to position themselves, obviously they want to crush their competition so that they'll be the only one left standing here. And obviously, only time can tell whether the acquisition is not just only beneficial for Microsoft, but also for the industry itself. Next, we have another tech company. So, 3 tech companies in a row. So, not only you have Amazon that have a lot of issues. Now, Microsoft, I would say they have negative issues, but another company is Apple. So, if you're an Apple lover, you buy their products. Something to be concerned with regards how they marketed the product and what they forgot to tell you in terms of their fragility of their product. So Apple was hit with a class action lawsuit over cracked Apple Watch screens injuring users. So that was concerning. So according to 9 to 5 Mac, so let's see here. So you can see here that if you own a Apple smartwatch, or one would think that it would be an enjoyable experience, so that it consolidates all of your technologies, having a smartphone, smartwatch, tablet, desktop, or even a laptop here. But obviously, wearable items can be dangerous if it's if the product is not thoroughly vetted or done quality control. And if you remember the experience of the Samsung's Galaxy Note, I think it was 10, where it caught fire inside an airplane. You could just imagine fire and in an airplane is not a good combination. And it's the same issue here, not necessarily catching fire, but they did not do a thorough research or analysis in their products. Obviously, when you have devices that has battery inside or lithium battery inside, heat is the main culprit here. So over time, when you use a device, it can warm up and can heat, and obviously heat and glass can have a different effect. It can expand the glass and can have severe repercussions here. And obviously Apple, either they did not do their due diligence in terms of doing the necessary research to understand what the capability of their products are or what are its limits, or they forgot to tell their consumers about it. It's not as if Apple has shady practices. Remember when they tried to when they tried to tell consumers that the recent update of your iPhone was to intentionally slow down your battery, so to save the battery uh, capability to lengthen the longevity of your battery. But obviously, if it slow down everything else, it's not a good experience here. And here we have another issue with with one of their core product here. So the lawsuit states here that the alleged design flaw of the Apple Watch Series 6, it suffers from a design flaw that makes the screen prone to breaking or detaching. And then obviously, if the glass detaches or breaks, obviously the razor sharp edges could be not a good experience. If you're wearing it all of a sudden, then it cracks, and then it can hurt you physically. And Apple mentions here that Apple did not provide enough room inside the Apple Watch design to account for the potential swelling of the battery. As I mentioned earlier, heat can expand the battery here. Obviously, if it expands, and as you see in many videos, if a lithium-ion battery, whether in a smartphone or in a smartwatch, if it expands to a dangerous point, it will expand where it could explode, which we don't want that to happen here. And according to the plaintiffs, they state that it poses a material and unreasonable safety hazard to consumers. Now, when you bring this to the court, do we wait for an severe accident or even death? Worst case, hopefully that will not happen before the courts intervene. Similar to when I was talking about when Tesla is trying to promote their full self-driving features in their Tesla vehicle, which is kind of dangerous marketing strategy. Obviously, it helps promote their product to sell more vehicles, but obviously what the product is being promoted to, what it's intended for, or what its actual application is totally different aspects, right? If it's not able to do self-driving on its own, full self-driving, then you cannot market it as such. And Apple did the same here in terms of marketing the product for its features to connect, to monitor your heart rate and so forth. But in terms of of its fragility, as I mentioned, when using it over a long periods of time, will this have a significant effect? Will they do a recall, or will they just try to go to the courts and blame I won't say blame, but make excuses so that it's not their fault, it's how the users use it? Maybe they misuse the item, so to speak. Or do we have to wait with more reports that people were harmed or injured because of said technology here? It goes on to say that the lawsuit says that this flaw was present in previous Apple models. So it's not just in the Series 6. So I'm assuming in their current model and in previous model, this has been present. And the question is, have they changed it, improve it? I'm sure they've heard of reports, which is another issue with their customer service. So meaning Apple violated their various consumer protection laws when it continued releasing Apple Watch models when they know it was actually flawed. So, but the sad thing here is the lawsuit is similar to the one that was filed way back in 2018. But the result was it was tossed out by the federal judge, who found out that the plaintiff failed to identify a specific defect. Now, at least this one, they have a specific defect in terms of the battery. So, if the lawyers can present the case well, and obviously Apple has a vast resources to protect their interests here, which obviously they should have done justice in the first place by designing a tremendous product that is safe to use. Because why is it that in their case, obviously they're using lithium-ion batteries to be able to do other functions, but other more expensive high-end watch like say Rolex, Patek Philippe, what else, JLC and AP, they use, obviously they're using a different type of battery, not to that extent, but it's safe enough to use that people are willing to pay tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of pesos to own those products, and yet Apple can't, create a product that is safe for usage. So only time can tell as to what changes will Apple make, or will consumers stop buying their products until they can change it, or will it have a negative effect in their branding image, so to speak, here. So we'll wait and see. Anyway, next we have a whole industry is being, I won't say vetted, but there was an inquiry by the US government in terms of how airline CEOs uh, made several flight cancellations even after taking a bailout from the government as much as $54 billion, according to CNBC.com. So let's take a look. So obviously, in the in spite of what happened last year, many companies, if they were not business fundamentally sound in the first place, if things like this were to happen and they were not able to recover, I mean, they should be allowed to die off, because another would rise up again. And business is difficult, right? And obviously many companies, whether it's small, medium, or large enterprises, have a difficult time surviving. So if you're not fundamentally sound in terms of how you manage your business financially and how you market your product and so forth, if you over leverage yourself in terms of being indebted more so than being liquid and so forth. But in the case of the airline industry here, are they too big to fail? That's why the government has to bail them out. And obviously it has severe repercussions, and obviously the intention of the bailout here is to help every employees in the industry, so that the companies cannot just lay them off because of obviously no one's traveling last year, only late last year to this year. But despite that, there's still a lot of employees who are being laid off, whether it was voluntary or not. Brings up another issue. So why should the government bail out those companies in the first place if this is the actions that they're going to take, and it only benefits the higher up management, the CEOs, the upper management here, and doesn't protect the interests of the middle all the way to the entry level employees. So imagine the flight stewardess, the pilots, the ground crew, all of those people, they were given options to furlough or or to retire early, or whatever the rationale that the company wants to make, so that it can reduce its workforce. Now, obviously, having too much employee is bad if there's no business to begin with. But obviously, as an airline business, they've invested a lot of their money in terms of aircraft, and buying so many aircrafts, that obviously thinking that the situation will not change like what happened last year. They were caught off guard, and they were over leveraged. That's why you see in many videos where during the height of our lockdown last year, there were a lot of airplanes that were parked in the airports or in the runways of many airports. So you can see the plethora of airlines that are being bought left and right. And take note, there are only two major players in terms of the airline manufacturing of airplanes here. You have Airbus, and then you also have Boeing, right? And obviously for them, they need to keep on churning out more airplanes, which, is it making them do justice here? But anyway, so let's take a closer look. So the top airline executives was told by the Senate panel, what was it? Told the Senate panel that a tight labor market and difficulty convincing some workers to pick up shifts contributed to mass flight cancellations this year. So despite the bailout that they were given last year, which is, I kind of find it funny, and obviously this is a serious matter, that giving them bailout, why is it that I don't see many CEOs, or not any, taking a cut on their paycheck so that they can sustain, obviously they're earning hundreds, millions of dollars, so that it can sustain the rest of the employees or their workforce, right? It would be a big gesture that would be highly appreciated by the employees. And obviously, if The consumers knew about this, that how they value their employees, that do they value their customers as well. So obviously this dilemma, the pandemic, is a temporary situation which eventually will subside. But the question is, what does the company do here? Do you just take a short-term solution by firing as many people as you can so you can reduce the cost, and yet by the time you have to rehire those people, they've already gone to other places, and thinking that you just need to hire new employees, which there's a double-edged sword. Yes, you might save on cost in the short run, but in the long run, by the time you have to rehire new employees, and take note of the new employees, you may save on the cost at the onset, but you have to train them, and obviously new employees tend to make a lot of mistakes along the way before they become more experienced. That's why you pay a lot of premium money on the more experienced employees, and obviously that's going to catch up in cost all over again. And obviously if they were to just maintain the status quo by, let's say the CEO would just only take $1 of his salary, so that everything else can be dispersed to the entire workforce, and other executive officers, executive management would do the same. I think that would be a big gesture, but obviously that's not what happened here. And obviously the government, in terms of the Senate, is now making an inquiry as to why CEOs of American Airlines, United Airlines, and Southwest Airlines, and even Delta have to explain themselves. Why is it that the money that was supposed to be used to help the employees so that no one has to be fired, to no fault of them, we're now here looking for more new employees here. So according to the U.S. airlines, they lost a record $35 billion last year, but executives say payroll support program, which prohibited them from laying off workers, was a bridge to get them to the point where air travel started to recover in earnest travel at the start of the pandemic. Now, it's not an exaggeration to say the program saved the airline industry, which Congress and administration recognize as a critical infrastructure that is essential to the economy, as it is unique, according to CEO Doug Parker in his testimony. Now, I don't agree with what he said in terms of when you say it's a big relief. And if they were to bail out those big industries, why not bail out other industries as well? So what makes them unique that they should be saved? And you remember the financial crisis way back in 2007 or 2008? The financial institution make a big mistake by leveraging the housing market, and look at what happened there. And the government bailed those financial institutions, and while those people who were left holding those mortgages were left penniless, so to speak. And yet they keep on helping those big industries. You have the car manufacturer, that's one. You have the financial institution, another, and now the airline industries. So you can just see the pattern here. It eventually shows that they're very picky on which one they want to save, but for the rest, they're left to fend for those. How about the small businesses who supports the majority of the economy here? Aren't they supposed to be helped as well? Shouldn't be have an aid as much of billions of dollars here that what those airline companies was just it's like taking their money, lunch money to town. But anyway, it mentions here that when demand returned faster than expected, a shortage of staff exacerbated routine problems, which is obviously that's a dead giveaway when demand increases. So that's why firing all of those people or laying those off people for whatever reason can be a critical point in terms of decision making. That's why you want to find a way to stabilize the difficulty in the short run, no matter how difficult it is, because it will subside and it will eventually normalize, so that customers will return, sales will return, revenue will return, so it will stabilize the operations for many businesses here. And so what's interesting here, the Dallas-based Southwest, which have 15,200 workers, or 25% of its staff, accepted a voluntary program, with 4,500 leaving the company permanently. And now it plans to hire 8,000 more employees in 2020 on top of the 5,000 new workers this year. So as I mentioned earlier, that the fact they had to fire and then rehire those different set of employees, which would add more cost in the long run, which is not beneficial for any business standpoint here. That's why, obviously, for other businesses that can do work from home setup, obviously for an industry, that's kind of difficult. But they should have tried to find a way to retain those services, especially if you have exemplary employees, whether it's pilot, stewardess, or even ground crew that has been supporting your company for several years or even decades. And then this is the things that they got just because you're in a difficult pinch. You're just willing to let them go, which is a common practice for many businesses here. Anyway, we'll keep you updated as to what will the CEOs face any repercussions here or not. Anyway, finally, for our last story, sort of interesting but kind of concerning in my part with regards to obviously in other parts of the world, universities or schools have reopened for students to come back to school. But for particular here in our country, especially here in the Philippines, schools have been maintaining the online setup here, which is, I think, kind of important because we have a difficult time, controlling the outbreak and minimizing the spread of the virus. Now, obviously, there's the vaccine, but are all kids going to be vaccinated here? And before you allow them to go back face to face here, and is the returning of face to face class worth it with regards to the risk and benefit of those situations here? I'm kind of apprehensive because there are a lot of stake here, because obviously for as a business, like in any universities, if one student were to get tested positive, what is the repercussion here? Will the schools be held responsible here, regardless of what protocols or safety measures that the school implements here, which is kind of important here? That's why I think the online setup is ideal for the meantime, until such time that either majority of all of the population has been vaccinated, which is a tall task in the first place. And what are our protocols in terms of if a student were to test positive, meaning do we shut down the operation because you have to do contact tracing? If you were in a school, or maybe you came from your home, you traveled to the school, whether to public transport or private transportation, who are you in contact with? So you can just imagine the complexity of the situation if one or few students were to get infected. So I don't know if it's the best time to resume the face-to-face, but obviously there are things that the universities has to consider. Obviously the deterioration of the facilities if they're not being used, but obviously it's only a 1-2 year situation. Eventually students will go back to face-to-face classes here, but is it the best time here? According to Rappler.com, as mentioned, Ateneo is gradually resuming the face-to-face classes by January of next year. So let's see here. Now, obviously, I have apprehensions with the plan here, but for Ateneo de Manila, they mentioned that the priority will be for classes for graduating students. Now, I think that makes sense because obviously, graduating students who are been stuck in the online class, and then if you're going to graduate, there's no special experience, so to speak, when obviously it should be a culminating experience from graduating to middle school to college, and obviously before you go to work, so to speak. So having that personal experience, going to the campus or to a facility where you will graduate, be with your classmates, with your families, take that photo ops and those that lot experience, so to speak, here. But obviously there are a lot of considerations that you need to take into and ensure the safety of the students. How will the setup be? Will it be a full jam-packed class? You can just imagine 20, 30, or even 40 students packed in a classroom. So if one were to get infected, hopefully not, it can easily spread right away, regardless if it's the faculty, the professors, or the students here. So you can just imagine the turmoil here, that because right now we have students, you know, who are having online classes being infected, which is, you know, as much as, you know, you want to be uh, you want to feel for them, and yet they have to do their education, so it's hard to how would you manage it. And obviously if they were to get infected, you know, at least you know, the school will not be targeted in terms of, you know, they were not in the campus. But once students go back to the campus, you're opening up yourselves for a lot of trouble, because if that situation were to occur, no matter how good the precautions is, it only takes one incident to create the spread and panic and pandemonium that, you know, what happened last year. So we're always hoping. So what the Ateneo is planning to, it's going to do a pilot run of its face-to-face class. Will be done in phases. So they'll be starting at their Loyola schools and professional schools, so undergrad and graduate schools here. So Ateneo said that they'll be providing or be implementing strict health protocols that will be enforced at the in-person classes. Now, obviously, you can only do so much, but there are limitations. And can you guarantee 100% safety for everyone concerned here? Because even if you're vaccinated, actually another incident, if you look at the National Basketball Association or the NBA, even if they have strict protocols that, you know, that they have to follow, stringent regulations and rules and so forth, I think in the reports, the Chicago Bulls, they have almost half of their rosters in safety protocols that have to be monitored here. And that's for a, obviously it makes sense for the NBA to continue because it's a business here. But for universities, your main customers are the students, and if they were to get infected, you know, it's a sad situation. And who's going to pay for the expenses here? Are the universities going to be open up for litigation here and so forth? Obviously, you want to avoid that as much as possible. Unless you can guarantee 100% safety for everyone here, I think you're better off staying with the online setup for the meantime. Now, question is, do you wait a year, 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years down the line? Obviously, you have to, you know, I think Ateneo is making a bet here that they can resume classes here, because if they're able to implement it properly and safely with great results, I think other schools would resume opening their schools as well. So this pertains to strict safety and health protocols for all employees and guests entering the campuses. So you have Loyola Heights, Rockwell, Pasig, and Salcedo. So they should be fully vaccinated or undergo appropriate COVID-19 testing required by the government regulations, or PCR, rapid testing, I think. But the problem here is, if you're going to do rapid testing, that's going to take time. Unless we have a way to test people and get the results quickly and reliably, that's going to be a problem. So I think having everyone being vaccinated is important. Let's see what else. So even according to the Commissioner of Higher Education, or CHED, they mentioned that only fully vaccinated students could join limited face-to-face, which brings up another question. If only fully vaccinated students can go back to class, how about those who are not fully vaccinated? What happens to them? Will they be left out, or will there be another separate class for them? And I think moving forward, regardless of what the time frame is, I think the two modes of classes should be offered for students moving forward. Obviously, there are students who want to have that face-to-face experience, then, you know, take the risk. But for those who are not willing to take the risk, there should be classes, let's say same subject, same class, but two different modes of learnings, whether to online or face-to-face, or even a hybrid one. So obviously, university has to develop or to innovate and move forward. Obviously, other universities abroad have already incorporated those modules or methods. So it's up to the university here in the country to adapt as well. And I think it makes sense to offer different modes of education, whether it's face-to-face and for online, because online reaches to a wider market, so to speak. And it's, you know, I think I had a student who was situated in China and another one in the United States, and still having classes here because luckily for them, they were able to go back to their hometown before the lockdown here. So it gives you that flexibility, and you can get a wider audience or students, whether they're enrolling, whether in different parts of the metro, in Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, or even other parts of the country in other regions. And obviously, at the end of the day, the online classes generates a significant chunk or higher revenue of fees, because there's no limit as to how many students you can enroll, because an online class can help, technically, theoretically speaking, hundreds of students in one class, and you only have to pay for one faculty. And obviously, for face-to-face, you can only accommodate, there are certain limit as to how many students you can have physically in a room that's not, like sardines, bunch up together close to one another here. Anyway, according to the CHED Executive Director, Cinderella Benitez Jaro, stated that for those unvaccinated or students who can't participate in limited face-to-face classes, they shall continue to be governed by our guidelines of flexible learning. Are we talking of blended learning or online learning? I think either we have that option, or it should be either we stick with online classes for the meantime. Now, obviously, it's not the ideal situation, but in terms of safety, it's better than risking it. I can just imagine the ordeal. That's why I'm very apprehensive of letting my kids, even though they're not in the university, but in terms of going to the campus, talking to other classmates, and obviously kids are not as responsible as adults, and they can get careless. They would talk to each other, play with each other, so you might never know that they might contract or spread the virus unintentionally and then infect the family, and that's the concerning thing. Even though you are vaccinated, you might be carriers, and the concerning thing is you might spread to other people without you knowing. So no one, it's somewhat like a silent assassin, so to speak. So obviously you want to avoid that difficulties, because we have lots of people, many people we have known in past year or so who have been lost because of this disease, and obviously we want to learn from those experiences and move on as best as we can. And obviously this is a complicated situation. It's not an easy solution, but obviously we have to move on upwards and onwards, so to speak. But anyway, I think that concludes our discussion for today. Anyway, if you are interested in checking the full article, I'll leave the description below, and you can leave your comments down below if you have any questions about the topic discussed today. As always, we'll do this again next week, same time, same channel. And next week is New Year's Eve, so that would be an interesting live discussion. And stay tuned also for the New Year's Eve special, where we will talk about a year in review of sorts of the biggest news, or interesting news that that has been prominent this past year or so. So stay tuned for that one. Anyway, as always, I'll see you again next week, same time, same channel. Take care and happy holidays.